If you've listened to Sports Byline for any period of time, you know I have a couple of hot buttons when it comes to the National Football League. One of those is the fact that they charge you a full ticket for exhibition games, but the other one is, which is something I've been on for a long time, is the blackout rule they have in the National Football League. I've urged the NFL to change it, but I don't think it's going to happen until there's going to be pressure brought to bear, probably out of Congress, and that is at least taking a step forward with Sherrod Brown, the Democratic senator from the state of Ohio, writing a letter to NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell asking him to consider changing TV's blackout policy in the NFL, citing the worst economic crisis in generations and high ticket prices as motivation. The senator joins us now. And, Senator, have you heard anything back from the NFL since you wrote that letter?
Not yet. Commissioner Goodell has not responded yet. I'm lucky enough to represent a state that has two football teams in the NFL, it's just kind of amazing to me that they still have this rule in place. The Browns sell out almost every game. I mean, the Steelers, the Browns, some of these teams sell out almost every game, almost every year, but the rule makes no sense, especially in a bad economy, as you say. It's $77 average ticket price for an NFL game. That means there's a whole lot of people that can't, even in good economic times, can't afford to go to a game. They want to stay home and watch it on TV, and because there weren't enough people in the seats, then they're going to be denied seeing their favorite team, and it's just not fair. And these teams forget that it's the fans and the communities that make them prosper. These are unusual businesses that way, but they seem to forget that too often.
What type of rationalization have you heard from others or the National Football League for this policy continuing?
Well, I really don't. I mean, it's interesting what you said about exhibition games too, because I know when you buy, say, Browns tickets, season tickets, you also got to buy the 2 or 3 exhibition, I guess 2, maybe 3 exhibition games with it. I don't really hear any justification, except that's the way that the NFL's always done it. I'm not sure it is, but it's at least the way they've done it for years, and they can do what they want to do. Well, again, most of these teams are playing in stadiums subsidized by taxpayers. Most of these fans have been lifelong fans and spent a lot of money on, everything from Brown sweatshirts to Bengals wristbands, and then they just don't treat their fans well. And I mean I've seen that. I'm a big Cleveland Indians fan, and that's not easy to be these days. But I just see that teams don't treat their fans very well sometimes, and it's just too bad because they obviously depend on it, but they continue to get away with it too.
You might explain to everybody, baseball has an antitrust exemption. What does football have, if anything?
Well, I think it has. I'm not a lawyer. I think it has the same kind of situation, doesn't it? That it's sort of a unique place in American business. I mean, commerce. A lot of people will say that, what's Congress doing involved in, in the steroid thing, when the House Representatives was doing the hearings. Why is Congress involved in that? Well, there are reasons, and I'm not putting a huge amount of time into this blackout issue. It's not as important as helping the auto industry begin to create jobs as it's starting to do in significant numbers in Ohio. It's not as important as that, but it is a major commercial activity, professional sports. They serve as role models, sometimes regrettably so, for our young people. They get a lot of media attention whenever there's anything on the NFL or on Major League Baseball or the NBA in Congress, like the drug hearings. It gets huge media attention because all these pampered but famous athletes come in front of the committee. So anything we do like that gets a lot of front and center attention. And as I said, I don't plan to do extensive hearings or anything on this. I wanted to send the letter. I want him to answer and make his case, and then we'll see. But as I said, it's not important enough, frankly, to me to spend huge amount of time, but it's important enough to bring it up because it's a lot of fans want to see games.
Yeah, when I saw the story, and I agree with you, I know that you and the others on Capitol Hill have a lot more important things to deal with, and I knew that you weren't, going overboard on this thing, but I really thought it was important that somebody shine a spotlight on this so that it might get the NFL's attention to at least investigate changing the policy to some degree, because it has never made any sense to me, Senator, that if an owner happens to either have a down year or a bad team, the fans are getting penalized because they don't come out and support a bad product.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I've as an Indians fan, I went to a lot of games in August and September as a kid where there'd be fewer than 5,000 fans there. Then we went through a period where the Indians actually set a major league record by selling out 6 or 7 years in a row in the 90s when they went to the playoffs almost every year. Now they're drawing somewhere between 10 and 15,000 a game, and the product on the field is not very good. And the players are, a year ago you didn't know who some of these guys were. So it's hard to build fan loyalty that way if the team's bad. And if the team's bad, fewer people go. So it doesn't make sense to me for the owners ought to want us to watch them on TV, so we build more interest and then eventually want to come to more games. But that's why I say I'm looking forward to Goodell's answer because I don't understand the reasoning. I don't think it's even in their financial interest, let alone in community interest, to do what they do. I'm sure they figure that it is, but I'd really like them to explain that way better than they have.
What of your colleagues? Have you gotten any reaction from your colleagues on Capitol Hill?
Not much. It's not. I mean, we're working on the we're working on the DREAM Act, or the Defense Authorization Bill. We're working on things more important than this. And I mean, I've heard in the hallway a couple of people that support it. I mean, they don't agree with the policy either, and just kind of are puzzled by it. I mean, it's just struck me as something that was curious that they've done all these years, and again, not necessarily even in their own economic interests, let alone the communities.
Let me switch gears with a couple minutes I have left here and talk to you about being a Cleveland Indians fan. I've been back there. I've done ball games in the old stadium. I did the playoff game between the Raiders and the Cleveland Browns on that cold winter day when the Raiders became.
Did that game.
I did that ball game, broadcast it, and I'll never forget. It was Senator. It was the coldest day in my life. It took me all the way over the state of Colorado, flying back with the Raiders before I finally thawed out. But take me back when you were young and you were a kid. You went to those early Cleveland Indian games. What was it like? Tell me.
Yeah. Well, I was born in 1952, and the Indians finished second in 1959. Between 1959 and 1994, they never finished first. They never finished second. They finished third once. So that's why being an Indians fan built character as a young man. But one of the things I remember best is my first night game with my dad, and I could have been 6 or 10 or whatever. And walking, it was dusk. It was dusky outside, and walking into the stadium. And then walking up from the sort of tunnel, as all the old stadiums were. The stadium was built in 1932, I believe, 32, 33. And looking out and seeing the field with the bright colored grass lit up by the lights. And I've been to a lot of day games, and the fields are beautiful, but when you first see the night game, and I was there, as I said, with my dad, and I was a young kid, and it's just a sight I'll never forget. And so, baseball was always my first love as a kid, and it's a sport I just love now. And I would add, since you haven't asked, that people in Southern Ohio are particularly excited about the Reds now because they are really good this year, and they're just putting big distance between them and the Cardinals. And I think the main reason for that is two reasons. One, the Reds are good. Second, Tony La Russa spoke at that stupid Glenn Beck rally, and I'm guessing that he's paying for that now by the Cardinals just getting creamed by the Reds game after game after game. So must have been that.
I got to tell you, one of the best nights I ever had in sports is I put together a dinner, husbands and wives, at a restaurant in the Italian section here of San Francisco. Bill Walsh, Carmen Policy, who I'm sure you know, also Dusty Baker and his wife, and Tony La Russa and his wife as well, and the former owners of the Oakland A's as well. And it was really one of those special nights. So I count both Tony and Dusty as friends of mine. So I know what you're talking about when you talk about Dusty. Who was your favorite player on the Indians team when you were a kid?
Probably Rocky Colavito. He was kind of everybody's favorite player in those days. He was a very slow right fielder, great arm, good home run hitter, led the league in home runs, had 4 homers in a game once that I was watching on TV against Baltimore when I was a little kid. And he had this great stretching exercise when he'd go up to the plate. He'd point his bat towards the pitcher, and every kid I knew imitated it in Little League. So he was probably the one. But I loved Louis Tiant and Sam McDowell, two great fireball pitchers, and watching them. And I thought all these players were really good. And then I read their statistics 20 years later, and I realized they were kind of a little above average player on a very average team,
We got about a minute left, but when you think back on all the years that you've been a baseball fan, is there a particular moment, Senator, that has kind of catalyzed in your mind, crystallized in your mind that you'll never forget?
Well, I got to go to again. My brothers and I had an arrangement. No matter where we lived, if the Indians ever played in the World Series, we'd find a way to go to Game 1. And I took my daughters, Emily and Elizabeth, who were then 9 and 11, maybe, and to the Indians' first game of the World Series against the Braves. and my younger daughter got a foul ball, and it was the foul ball has on it stamped World Series 1995, and she thinks it belongs to her, but really it really does belong to her. So it's pretty cool.
Well, I want to thank you for explaining the letter that you wrote to the NFL.
Sure.
I hope that you have success. And do me a favor, have someone in your office let me know if you do get a response.
Oh, absolutely. Of course we will.
Because I'd like to pass it on to the fans, because this has been a hot button for a long time, Senator, and I appreciate you giving me a little bit of your time. I know you're busy up there on Capitol Hill. Thanks a lot. Give my best to Senator Nelson for me.
Bye-bye.
Sherrod Brown, who is the Democratic senator from the state of Ohio, he wrote a letter to NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell asking him to consider changing TV's blackout policy in the NFL, citing the worst economic crisis in generations and high ticket prices as a motivation. I'm glad to see somebody taking a step in that direction. We'll take a break, continue with more of you and Sports Byline.